To the elect of the nation of Israel, the elect of Yahushai, all praises and glories due to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Kodash, who have given us this knowledge, this understanding, this truth, especially in the times that we're living in. And believe you me, these times are about to get worse, a whole lot worse, before it gets better. When is it going to get better? When Yahushua comes and destroys this society, destroys Esau's kingdom with a mighty destruction, and then sets up his kingdom on the planet Earth. And his kingdom, pursuant to 2 Peter 3 and 13, his kingdom is going to be a kingdom of righteousness. And by default, his kingdom is going to be the kingdom of Israel, which in reality is really the kingdom of Yahushua, but it's also known as the kingdom of Israel. And he's going to have King David sitting on the throne right beneath him. There's a scripture where it speaks about the order. To roughly paraphrase that scripture, it goes, and every man have his order. And the order starts with Yahushua and then King David all the way down. Okay, the rest of the 144,000.
But now he is risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. But every man in his own order, the first fruits, afterward they that are at his coming. Then cometh the end, when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to God, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and all authority and power. For he must reign till he hath put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death, for he hath put all things under his feet. But when he said,
Alright, Shalom. It's a brother Quashab coming back at you with another quick lesson. And before I get started, I want to give all praises, glory, infinite knowledge unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rachak Wadash, and double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace, blessings, salutations be to the hopefully elect, alright, as well as those that believe in the gospel and may even endure to the end, Lord willing, alright. And I just want to get into a quick lesson. I don't have a particular title yet, but it's pretty much predicated around the basis of the heathen, okay, ultimately having to keep, alright, the laws, statutes, commandments, alright, Israel being perfect, alright, as well as, them ultimately being subject, alright, until they're still, going to have those fleshly bodies, okay. Only Israel will be the ones that receive those glorious bodies, alright, have the laws, the statutes, and commandments in their inward parts, alright, in which, we can start with that. Alright, this is, was that Hebrews 8, I believe. Alright, and if you hear a little background noise, Salakia. So this Hebrews chapter 8, and I'll start at 8. It says, for finding fault with them, he said, behold, the days come, said the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in a day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, said the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, said the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a power, and they shall be to me a people. All right, and that's what exactly the Lord is going to do for every single Israelite on the planet Earth. All right, when they, even the ones, the 2/3 that die on this side, all right, even the ones that don't receive Yahushua that is coming, who are in those places that are scattered abroad, all right, when they be put down and they come back in the reincarnation, okay, in which we're going to get into a little bit of being a part of that, those first fruits, but, this starts with the elect, all right, having those laws, statutes, commandments written in their inward parts, man. All right. And we won't ever go off again, you see, because these bodies, man, these fleshly bodies are the reasons, that we go off. Apostle Paul spoke about it, that, things that we want to do, we don't do them. And the things that we don't want to do, we do them, because it's a constant fight. It's a constant battle, all right, within these bodies, man, all right, which is why the Lord said, and even in verse 8, he said, for finding fault with them, which was the people. Nothing was wrong with the covenant. The covenant, the law is not going to change, all right? But he said, nah, I'm going to change the way the people are, all right? My people, Israel, you see? And you read it in NLT, it says, but when the Most High found fault with the people, you see? So it was our fault, we went off. We couldn't wrestle against the flesh. The flesh won, each reincarnation, man, the flesh won, okay? And even in these present times now, we still not perfect, So the Lord said he's going to make and put it into our laws, put the laws into our minds, all right, our lives. It's going to be carved in, you see. It's going to be etched. If you etch a writing in a stone, you can't take it out, man, So that's what the Lord is going to do with us, all right? You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, all right? And it's not, I'll read verse 11. It says, and they shall not teach every man his neighbor. All right, so we're not going to be teaching, Israel to repent, all right, know the Lord, turn back to your power. No, man, all right? And every man his brother saying, know the Lord, for all shall know me from the least to the greatest. So after this destruction, all of Israel is going to remember. They are going to know who their true power is, okay? And they're going to come back through the loins of one of the first fruits, all right, which you had the clip plan, all right, and you had the clip play in the beginning, all right. Blessed is he that had part of the first resurrection, which we're gonna get into it, all right. But the point of this was, if we don't have to teach our brothers, all right, we're not gonna have to teach our brothers, our sisters, right, to know the law, because it's gonna be in them. But as for the other nations, they will have to be taught. All right? So we're going to go to Micah, right, chapter 4, verse 1. It says, but in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the Lord Yahweh shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow into it, right? So that government under Yahushua, all right, which King David is going to reign under Yahushua, this government is going to be established, okay, in the last days, all right, in the coming times after the destruction of Babylon the Great, okay, when Yahushua puts all of the enemies in subjection, okay, as David did in the days of old, which is why the Lord always mentions, he's going to raise up the tabernacle of David and build it as in the days of old, man, all right? So it says, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it, right? Now, verse 2, it says, and many nations, okay? Many nations shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord Yahweh, and to the house of the power of Jacob. You see? The house of the power of Jacob, all right? Who is Jacob? He's the patriarch, all right, of the 12 tribes, all right? His name was changed to Israel, all right? Through, the history of him wrestling the angel, right? And Israel means the prince of the power, right? So we are princes of Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, right? It says, and many nations shall come and say, and come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways. So, all right, when the Lord is when the government of Yahushua is ultimately set up, okay, we will have to teach the heathen the ways, man. All right, the laws, statutes, the commandments, all right, and we'll ultimately judge them as well, you see? That's why, brothers always say, in order to be a righteous judge, you have to know what? Both good and evil, you see? So we're going to understand and know what they're going through in those bodies, all right? But they won't have the favor and mercy of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushua, because in that day, it's actually going to be easy to keep the commandments, right? We know that, the Lord said, 1 John 5:3, that the commandments are not grievous, man. All right? So, I would say, and this is facts, man. It's harder to keep the laws here in Babylon rather than keep the laws of the scriptures, man. All right? And the laws of the scriptures, it actually does you good, right? When the Lord created it, he said this is choosing this way is life, and the other way is a death, right? Which is why I tell you in Proverbs, the 21st chapter, and around the 16th verse, that, if you wander out of the way of understanding, which is written throughout the scriptures, the wisdom, you wandering out of that way, you remain what? In the congregation of the dead. All right? So if you don't have this word, or if this word is not being taught to you, then you are dead, man. All right? You're dead to the Lord. You see? So it says, for the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. You see? So the heathen will have to be taught in the kingdom. All right? After those 1,000 years are fulfilled, all right, a hardcore slavery, and Esau is ultimately eradicated off the face of the planet Earth. All right, these other nations are going to return to their land, right? And they're going to practice the laws, statutes, and the commandments, right? So let's get that. I believe it's Revelation 20, all right? I was just looking at it. Revelation chapter 20, verse 5, right? I'll start at verse 4. It says, and I saw the thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua and for the word of the Most High, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Hamashiach 1,000 years. So that 1,000-year period, all right, it's talking about the first fruits, all right, chiefly those that stand stiffly for the name, receive those crowns, man, all right, in which they didn't, I don't want to be a part of that number, but, these are they which stood so stiffly for the name of the Lord, all right, which some brothers may be martyrs, some brothers not going to taste death, we know that, all right, but they say, I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua, so some brothers actually going to get beheaded, man, all right, just for the witness of Yahushua, because this prophecy has to be true. Now it says, verse 5 is the point, right? It says, but the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years. So the rest of the dead is pertaining to the other nations, okay? Because they are without the law, statutes, and commandments, all right? They don't have it. You see, when you go to Baruch 3 and 10, it says, how happened it to Israel that thou art in thy enemy's land, that thou art waxing old in a strange country, that thou art defiled with the dead, all right? And it's not talking about people literally being dead. It's talking about being in that dead state, all right, as we once were before the Lord woke us up, through this word, through this truth, which is, I did a lesson a while back, going into how the word is life, the word, it makes you alive, you see? It wakes you up from the dead, it's the whole prophecy of Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, Now it says, verse 11, that thou art counted with them that go down to the grave. So here we are in a strange country, all right, which is America, all right, and we are defiled with the dead, man. Majority of our people, especially 2/3. You are dead, you 2/3, man. You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans that's slated for destruction on this side, because you refuse to repent and you refuse to turn back to your power. You see? Verse 12 says, thou hast forsaken the fountain of wisdom. And that's what, the bulk of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans do. All right, you have forsaken the fountain of wisdom and you have trusted in your oppressor, right? It says, verse 13, for if thou hast walked in the way of the Most High, thou shouldest have dwelled in peace forever, right? And that's where it comes in, with the Lord ultimately making us immortal, all right, by putting the law, statutes, and commandments in our inward parts, all right? Giving us those spiritual powers, and so much more, you see? And we will walk in peace forever, right? Because, like it says in that 1 Corinthians 15, okay, which I'm going to jump around in there. you know, there's some rain coming. Yep. It said that in the introduction clip, right? It's 1 Corinthians 15 and 23. It says, but every man in his own order, Hamashiach the first fruits, afterward they that are Hamashiachs at his coming, right? So every man in his own order, all right? The first fruits represent those that had part in that first resurrection, man, all right? Those that repented, returned back to the Lord, you know, and those that is going to reign with Yahushua, all right, be a part of that government, the 144,000, okay? The woman that's slated for salvation to help bring back the kingdom, you see? Now it says, then come at the end, when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to the Most High, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and authority and power, for he must reign till he had put all enemies under his feet, you see? And that's, the Lord is going to, you know, kill, destroy, all right, take down the kings of this world until all the enemies be put under his feet, man, all right? Until, what they call it, till he, you know, the Lord gonna step till there ain't no more stepping to be done, man, you know? So, when you go back to Micah, and Salakia, if I'm, you know, just jumping around a little bit, it's Micah 4, verse 1. Lord willing, you know, the lesson be edifying, right? So when they say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, you know, this is a prophecy that has to be fulfilled, all right? Because what? He's going to reign until all the enemies be put under his feet, all right? And he's going to put down all rule, power, and authority, all right? And then that government of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, all right, that the kingdom of heaven is going to be established on earth. So this is what it's talking about when it says that, you know, the house, the mountain of Yahweh and the house of the Most High, the power of Jacob. You know, this is what that's talking about, the government of Yahushua, all right? And the heathen will have to be taught, you know, the law, statutes, and commandments. Our people won't have to be taught, but the heathen will, okay? Once they return back to their own lands, okay? And there's going to be different things that they have to do. They have to come up, worship the king, all right? Keep the high holy days, all right, the different feasts. They're going to have to take part in all of that, all right? Just like, you know, when we were coming up in the world, all right, we took part in Christmas, all these different holidays, all right? They're going to be subject to the same things, man, all right? Because Esau's ruling now, so we're subject to his laws, right? We have to abide by his rules, you see? So how much more when the righteous are in authority, the whole planet Earth is going to have to abide by those rules, you see? Not the wicked, all right? Because majority of this devil's rules is wicked, man. All right, the way he oppresses, the things that he writes in the laws, the legislation, all right, the Isaiah 10:1, the unrighteous decrees, right? And we're subject to those things, and they're wicked, man, you know? And this devil changes the law, you know, it makes new ones. No, man, all right? The Lord has a certain, the law has been set up, all right? And it covers everything, okay? It covers all the different matters, the judgments that has to be made, all right? And it's all righteous, man. You see? So the heathen are actually going to love it, to actually abide by that. You know, you're going to have some that's going to buck up, you know, that's going to be in those fleshly bodies. So, you know, they're going to be being deceived, all right? They're going to have demons on them, you know? But that's what we would be there to rebuke, all right? Chastise and correct them, man. You see? Now, I want to finish this out. Revelation 20:5, it says, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished, you know, which represents that 1,000-year period of having all of the heathen, all 17 nations in captivity, okay? The sons of men and the sons of the wicked, you see? But the separation comes when the sons of men, all right, which are the other nations, and not including Esau, Edom, okay? The sons of the wicked are Esau, Edom, all right? The so-called white man. He is one distinct classification for himself, all right? So that he can be identified who is the wicked, right? According to Malachi chapter 1, you see? Now it says, and this is the first resurrection. It says, blessed and holy is he that had part of the first resurrection. So he that endured to the end. You see, a part of being a part of those first fruits, right? And which that's why I wanted to go back to the 1 Corinthians 15 and 23. All right. And it says, but after every man his own order, Hamashiach, the first fruits afterward, they that are Hamashiach's that is coming. You see? So I'm going to jump down to about 50. Yep. All right, and I'm going to come back to that. All right. It says on Revelation 20:6, is blessed and holy is he that had part in the first resurrection. On such the second death had no power, but they shall be priests of the Most High and of Hamashiach, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. All right. In which the second death, it represents the nuclear destruction. Right? And so those that are slated for salvation, who will be saved, they won't have part in that. Right? And we're going to live, and we're going to reign, we're going to rule with Yahushua. All right? 1,000 years into eternity, man. All right? Now, I wanted to go from here. Zechariah, the 14th chapter. All right? Because I want to make that point, on those nations having to come and worship Yahweh by Shema Shai, all right, as well as keep those high holy days, right? Your Feast of Tabernacles, Pesach, all right? And I forget, I believe it's one more, that all the families at Jerusalem, had to travel. The families abroad had to travel to Jerusalem for these high holy days, all right? So this is Zechariah 14 and 16. It says, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord Yahweh of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, right? So this is going to be a mandatory thing that the nations will have to do when they go back to their land, right? Because Esau Edom, he won't be here, okay? After the 1,000 years fulfilled, the sons of the wicked will be no more. Okay, they'll be eradicated off the face of the planet Earth. All right, the other 16 nations are going to be the only nations that can actually go back to their lands. All right, and keep the law, statutes, and commandments. Right, and yes, we'll still have them subject unto us. All right, let's get that real quick in Obadiah, first chapter. Right. Right, so Obadiah 1 and 17, it says, but upon Mount Zion shall be deliverance, and shall there be holiness. And the house of Jacob shall possess their possessions, and the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for the Lord Yahweh has spoken it, right? So after the 1,000 years fulfilled, and they have done that gruesome, all right, horrible slavery, you see, they're going to go back into the spirit world. It's going to be a bonfire, right? It said the house of Jacob and the house of Joseph, the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and Joseph a flame. So a flame and a fire, what does that do to what you put in it? All right, it turns to stubble. And that's what Esau going to turn into, stubble, man. Now what the Father does, after that, pertaining to prophecy, we don't know, okay? Because we know he's the only one that can actually destroy the spirits, right? So that's up to, the Father. We know in part, and we prophesy in part, all right? But I just wanted to bring that out to back up the point, right? So we can go back to Zechariah, the 14th chapter. What was that? Verse 17, I believe. All right. It says, and it shall be that whoso will not come up of all the families of the earth. All right. So all the nations, you see, it says all the families of the earth. All right. Unto Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord Yahweh of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. So when you don't have no rain, all right, you don't yield any crops, all right, any herbs. You see, your cattle, Everything dies when you don't yield any herbs, man. You see? It says, and if the family of Egypt go not up and come not that have no rain, there shall be the plague wherewith the Lord Yahweh will smite the heathen that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So like I said, it's going to be mandatory, all right, to keep the high holy days. And if it's mandatory to keep the high holy days, how much more is the law, statutes, and commandments, right? So it says, this shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, right? And so you're going, hey, man, you're going to die to death, all right, a famine, and it'll be much more harsher judgments than that, all right, which I believe, okay? This is just a start, all right, because the Lord said we're going to rule them with a rod of iron, right? So when you go to Revelation, the 2nd chapter, all right, Lord, brother Amawad, put me on, all right, with this word exousia, all right, Revelation 2:26, it says, and he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father, okay? So let's go into this word power, okay, which is, exousia, right?
Strong's G, 1849, exousia, exousia.
Right, exousia, right? It says the power of choice, liberty as doing one pleases, all right? And that's true freedom, all right? When you can literally do as you please, you see? It says a leave or permission, physical and mental power, the ability or strength which one is endued, which either he possesses or exercises, right? So the power of authority and of right. So if you got the influence, it's all power, man, okay? This is having total control, you see? Like your boy Alex Jones said, total control. Yes, we're going to have total control, all right, over all the nations, man, all right, over all the animals, man, you see? It says to him that overcome it, though, so the main thing to do is to endure and overcome, all right? Now, this is the point in the 4th definition, but it says the power, all right, the power of rule or government, the power of him whose will and commands must be submitted to by others and obeyed, okay? So our will, okay, the Lord will and commands, it must be submitted to and obeyed. Yeah, so, we'll have that universal power, all right? And it says in the I definition, authority over mankind, okay? And that's what comes with being transformed, okay, at the last trump. And I'll just read verse 53 and get the point and get out of here. So it says, for this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible shall put on incorruption, and this mortal shall put on immortality, then shall it be brought to pass, saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. All right, and that's what comes with being made immortal, all right, that power, okay, and all of these nations being put into subjection. All right, subjection to the law, statutes, commandments, subjection unto us, all right, because they're going to be our slaves, man, all right? So, that's pretty much the point. And I don't want to write this out. This lesson was edifying. So with that, I give all praises, glory, infinite honors unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Kakwadash. Double honors once again to the apostles, and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings. Salutations be to the old for elect. Till next time I say shalom.